A vitamin B12 deficiency can create some significant health issues in some significant systems, and people who have a legit B12 deficiency usually feel pretty lousy. And there's some real benefits that we'll talk about in this video that can come from supplementing with B12. But I'm also going to explain how some folks that are supplementing with B12 are making their situation much worse. And some folks that really should be supplementing with B12 are doing it totally wrong. We're also going to talk about some of the possible underlying causes for B12 deficiencies and steps you can take to correct those so you might not need to supplement with B12 anymore. You don't want to miss this.
TC Hale is not a doctor and does not claim to be a doctor or licensed in any type of medical field. Don't be an idiot and use anything heard on the show as medical advice. This information should be used for educational purposes only, and you should contact your doctor for any medical advice. Now get off me.
So remember, I'm not a doctor and I'm not giving anybody medical advice. If your doctor has told you to supplement with B12, I don't want anything that you hear here to make you go against what your doctor's telling you. Your doctor knows your situation more than I know your situation. I just want to share some studies and some information about B12 that could help you figure out what might work best for you. And I'll link those studies in the description below this video if you want to dig a little bit deeper. But when we're looking at vitamin B12, it can be a pretty big deal. It kind of helps us with red blood cell production or DNA synthesis. It's important for proper nervous system function and energy production. So when someone's not getting enough B12, there's a wide variety of symptoms that can really get magnified and health issues that can really become problematic. But when we're looking at the cautions and some of the side effects that might come from supplementing with B12, we see things like headaches and diarrhea and fatigue. So let's look a little bit about why these things might show up for some people and what kind of signals that might be telling us, that our body's trying to say, hey, it's not really going so great. Maybe you put that bottle down for a minute. And when it comes to whether we should take B12 or not, it has a lot to do with our circadian rhythm at the cellular level. So it was Dr. Emanuel Revici who helped us understand that at the cellular level, the body moves back and forth. And during the day, it should be in this catabolic state, where the body's very good at creating energy and keeping us going all day, and also breaking down tissues so that they can be rebuilt and renewed. And then at night, the body moves into this anabolic or rebuild and repair state, where we're really good at sleeping and refixing everything so the body can be rebuilt and renewed. So both of these states are appropriate. They're both very important. The problem is some people can get stuck in one of these states most of the time, or maybe they're pushed way too far into one of these states. And if a person is dealing with an imbalance in one of these areas, it can create a wide variety of health issues. So when we're looking at B12, when we're looking at our body's natural circadian rhythm, we need to understand that B12 is very pro-catabolic. So it's going to push the body more into this catabolic state. So for someone dealing with issues from the body being way too far in this anabolic state, so we see issues like chronic constipation and anxiety and tachycardia and hard tumors. And a lot of these issues have other possible causes as well. But an overly anabolic imbalance has the ability to create these issues and a whole lot more. So if somebody's dealing with some of these issues and they start supplementing with B12, that's going to help move their body out of this anabolic state that they're so severely crammed into and help the body be a little bit more balanced. So it really could help them feel and function a whole lot better. They may think that B12 is magic and they're going to go out and start squawking, hey, everybody's got to take shovelfuls of B12. Look what it did for me. You should take it too. The problem is, if somebody is really stuck in this catabolic state, that can create issues like insomnia and diarrhea and insulin resistance and just breaking down because they really can't move into this anabolic state where they need to rebuild and repair. We also see things like headaches and some other of these issues, the chronic diarrhea that can come about from taking B12. Well, this helps it to make sense. This catabolic state, if somebody's really stuck in this state, it causes the body to send too much water to the bowels and not enough to the kidneys. So with that much water going to the bowels, it can create a chronic diarrhea issue. Now there's lots of other causes of chronic diarrhea, but this is a very common one. And that might be a reason why a common side effect of supplementing with B12 is chronic diarrhea. But A person might really have a B12 deficiency. They might need some B12, but if they're also really stuck in this catabolic state and they start using supplemental B12, they could really magnify this imbalance and magnify any of these issues and other issues that can come from an overly catabolic state. So it's really important to look at your body chemistry before you just start taking some supplement because it's supposed to be good as a remedy for some type of symptom. You really want to understand where your body is before you start forcing it in one direction or the other. This also means that since B12 is pro-catabolic, even if it's right for your chemistry, it should be taken in the morning when the body should be in a more catabolic state. A lot of people take B12 at night and they're working against their body's natural circadian rhythm. We also want to look at some of the other benefits and effects that B12 can have on the body. And we need to look at energy production. So everybody has the ability to either burn fat for fuel or burn carbohydrates for fuel. And we really want the body to be able to do both. This is called metabolic flexibility. The problem is a lot of people are stuck where they're really more of a fat burner, and some people are kind of stuck where they're really more of a carb burner, where if you take away all their carbohydrates, they're going to hardly be able to function as a human being. And a lot of people here, we see a lot of type 2 diabetics over here, and that's because they're not having the ability to process glucose correctly. The cells have become less receptive to that insulin, so they can't process those carbohydrates or glucose, so their body starts to process fat for fuel. It's the only source of fuel they have for fat. So when someone's stuck in this state and they eat a lot of carbohydrates, that's going to create a lot of problems for them. If this person over here in this carb burner state, they're usually leaning on this hypoglycemic side. They're dealing with issues like sugar crashes and maybe a lot of mental and emotional issues because they can't keep that blood sugar on an even keel. They're eating all these carbohydrates and sugars because that's the only way they can feel good is when they eat that. If they just eat proteins and vegetables, they can't process that like we should be able to. So they're kind of stuck over here in this state. And they can't keep their blood sugar on an even keel, so they have a lot of mental and emotional issues where the brain's not getting the fuel that it needs, and there's other possible issues that can create that as well. But this is common to see when someone is stuck in this state. So if someone's stuck over here and they supplement with B12, well, that's going to help them come over here a little bit. B12 is very good at helping us to burn fat for fuel. And a lot of people will say, hey, well, I'm real fat. I want to burn fat for fuel. I should take B12. The problem is a lot of people that are overweight, not everybody, but a lot of people that are overweight are over here in this area where their body is really only having the ability to burn fat for fuel, but the body's kind of taking every carbohydrate that they put in the body and storing it as fat because they don't have the ability to process that glucose correctly. So in this scenario, maybe someone's a type 2 diabetic, maybe they're just leaning insulin resistant, and we know all the troubles that can come when high insulin goes really high. So this person is having all these troubles, and they take B12 because they hear it's great for fat loss, and they're really just magnifying all these problems. They're making all of their problems much worse. So again, that doesn't mean supplementing with B12 is bad. Look at the folks over here. It practically changed their entire life. It turned all their woes around and made everything better. So it's really about understanding where your body chemistry is. The good news is this is not super difficult to figure out, and I'll give you some free resources so you can learn how to do it. My book, Kick Your Fat in the Nuts, kind of walks you through running simple self-tests at home that you can do with tools you pick up at like a pharmacy or a health food store. And you can run these tests and get an idea if you might be balanced in this area or in that anabolic or catabolic area to have an idea of what's going to benefit you the most. And the book is available on Amazon, but I'll put a link in the description below where you can get the whole thing totally for free, and that'll walk you through that process. And if you hate to read, we also have a free digestion course that'll walk you through those same testing procedures and help you figure out what the results mean to you. And we'll put the link to that free course in the description below this video as well. So it's really important to understand where you are before you know what's going to be appropriate for you. You'll find that it's a lot easier to improve health issues when you learn how to work with your body instead of just doing what all the cool kids are doing some remedy that's supposed to work for a symptom, when the reality is that most symptoms have 4 or 5 possible underlying causes. So it's really about understanding what's needed for your body. And if you find that B12 is appropriate for you, I know people are going to ask me, well, what kind should I take? There's all these different kinds out there. And there's a lot of synthetic vitamin B12s like cyanocobalamin. And I'm not a big fan of these. These seem to be some of the reasons that people have problems when they take B12. And this is usually the type of B12 that you're going to find in like a multivitamin or like energy drinks and that kind of stuff. And at high levels, it seems to have the ability to create problems. There's also methylcobalamin, which is like an animal source type version of B12, and I like that a lot better. Some people are going to say you should use a liposomal so it can get right into the cells, and there's a lot of opinions about all that, but we don't focus on that a whole lot, because when we're supplementing with B12 with a client to help them fix some type of imbalance, our goal is always to do that temporarily. We want to help the body get the B12 from the food that we're eating. So we want to look at why would the person have a deficiency in the first place. And there's a lot of people that would have a deficiency because they're vegan or vegetarian and they're not eating animal products, so they don't have the ability to access the type of B12 that's really easy to assimilate by the body. And a lot of people will be doing a vegan diet because of, some type of ethical beliefs or religious beliefs. And I think that's fine. I think you should just kind of keep doing that. If a person's doing a vegan diet because they think it's the healthiest thing, they're going to want to read my book that I gave you the link to get free in the description below, because there's a lot of downsides to a vegan or vegetarian diet that the bad science has kind of pushed us away from really understanding. So if a person's eating a vegan diet because they think it's the healthiest option, they could simply start implementing some animal proteins to access that B12. But the real reason that most people can't access B12 is because there are digestive malfunctions that are restricting their ability to break their food down correctly and get all the nutrients out of that food. Let's look at some of these studies here that kind of help us understand that the body makes stomach acid for a reason. When we eat food, the stomach should make hydrochloric acid, or HCl. And this HCl is meant to help us acidify that food so that we can break it down and get the nutrients out of that food. And when that acidified food leaves the stomach, that's when the gallbladder squirts this alkaline bile down to help neutralize those acids. And when those opposite pHs collide, it creates this sizzle that really helps us bust the food apart and get all the nutrients out of that food. The problem is it's very common for someone not to be making enough stomach acid, and it's very common for someone's bile to become too thick and sticky to flow correctly. So if you're having issues with either of those, it makes it to where we can't really break the food down the way that we're supposed to break it down. So if a person's dealing with any type of digestive symptoms at all, it becomes very important for them to look at their digestion and see if there's steps they can take to improve those malfunctions to help them get nutrients out of the food. And that book and the free course both walk you through figuring out which aspects of digestion for you might need a little bit of help. But when we look at these studies that I linked in the description below, we look at this clinically significant vitamin B12 deficiency secondary to malabsorption of protein-bound vitamin B12. And this talked a little bit about when we see hypochlorhydria, which is a lack of stomach acid, we see an inability to really break down those protein molecules and access the nutrients that are bound to those, especially being B12. And in this study of vitamin B12 deficiency induced by the use of gastric acid inhibitors, calcium supplements has a potential effect modulating. They say here that use of gastric acid inhibitors has emerged as a risk factor of vitamin B12 deficiency, especially in older adults. So if they're using some of these medications that are used to turn off stomach acid, and that's inducing a state that is becoming a risk factor for vitamin B12 deficiencies, doesn't that make sense that if someone else wasn't making enough stomach acid, even if they weren't taking in a medication that was reducing stomach acid, that they could also experience vitamin B12 deficiencies? So there's a wide variety of reasons that a person would not be making enough stomach acid, and it's very common. We see it all the time. So this seems to be the biggest issue when it comes to vitamin B12 deficiencies that we see. And a lot of people are going to tell you, oh no, it's this intrinsic factor. There's this issue in the stomach that is also made by the peridial cells, just like HCl is made by those cells in the stomach. and it's this intrinsic factor that helps us assimilate this B12. But you'll see in some of these studies that there seems to be a correlation between this stomach acid and the intrinsic factor. And with our clients, not once has any of us supplemented with intrinsic factor to try to fix a vitamin B12 deficiency, but we do supplement with betaine HCl like some of these studies suggest to do when there's a hypochlorhydria issue. And then we see those B12 numbers improve very greatly. And just by helping the body digest food the way that it's supposed to be digested, all of a sudden everything works. So our opinion is just sort of that this intrinsic factor is one of those things that's involved in the digestive process that seems to be triggered by the stomach acid. There's a lot of the digestive process that's triggered later on because the stomach acid is there. And when there's not enough stomach acid, some of these other things seem to not really get triggered correctly. So it seems common knowledge that, oh, a vegan is going to have a B12 deficiency. Like a lot of people just accept that as common knowledge now. But wouldn't it make sense also that if the person couldn't break these animal proteins down to get all the nutrients out of it, wouldn't it be like they were a vegan? Because the body's still not getting those nutrients that are in those animal proteins, just as if a person who is not eating those animal proteins. So it's really about having the ability to break that food down correctly so you can access the nutrients in that food. And if somebody can do that, all of a sudden they don't need to supplement with B12. The B12 numbers go back to where they really should be. So I hope that helps you find some answers, and those free tools in the description below the video should walk you through any of those processes if you feel like you need to fix any digestive issues. And if you're not sure what your situation is, you can jump over right now and check out our video on 10 signs of low stomach acid to see if that might be a problem you need to look into a little bit more. I can't wait to hear about your results.